Zack Polanski appeared on Laura Kuenssberg on Sunday, and Laura began by asking him about his retweet criticising the police.
You said you were sorry for sharing that opinion that questioned the behaviour of the police, but do you or do you not think that the police were heavy-handed in how they apprehended the suspect?
I was very concerned by what I saw, and I remain concerned. The reason why I've apologised is because I accept that X or social media is not the appropriate forum to have that concern. I also think an open letter from the Commissioner also wasn't necessarily the appropriate forum, but I'm glad we've resolved that now.
I'm not surprised that Laura Kuenssberg's asking him about the retweet. It just seems to be hot news around Polanski. But after giving his answer, she just continued to press him.
So you do still think that it looks like the police were heavy-handed, even though there was a man with a knife running along a British high street?
I think it's important to say that officers are incredibly brave when they run towards situations that most of us, including myself, will want to run away from. I also accept, as an elected member of the London Assembly, and in fact as a police and crime committee, that it's important that everyone who works in public service, including people who are being brave, should not be above scrutiny. And so I think it's important that I have that conversation with the Commissioner, and we always make sure that action's proportionate, no matter how brave.
Very reasonable answer. Seems like it, right? Seems pretty clear to me. But Laura continued to push.
But do you think that it was proportionate? I mean, everyone's seen the video, everyone's seen the pictures from all sorts of angles, because that's how things often happen in 2026. Do you think it was proportionate?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I'm not sure everyone has seen the video, because the video is so graphic, potentially understandably, and that's the conversation, that I don't think it's always been shared. That being said, I accept that social media is not the forum, and I don't think, sadly, national broadcast is the forum either.
Next, she asked him about anti-Semitism.
Wrong forum. The UK's counter-terror chief has said that anti-Semitism is the biggest national security emergency in almost 10 years. Do you agree with that?
Jewish communities aren't safe, and this isn't an abstract idea for me as a Jewish person. In fact, in the last 6 weeks alone, 2 people have actually been arrested in relation to anti-Semitic actions towards me. And just yesterday, the Times newspaper published a pretty vile anti-Semitic caricature of me and have yet to apologise or withdraw that. I don't think we make Jewish people any safer, though, by pitting, we just had that conversation, you just had that conversation with Heidi Alexander about Palestinian marches. I am both pro-Palestinian and I'm Jewish, and I care about Jewish safety. There's no conflict in those positions. And actually, I think where some of the conflict comes is actually from Benjamin Netanyahu, who frequently conflates people's Jewish identities with supporting the Israeli government.
I mean, super solid answer, and it would be hard to disagree, but classic Laura in Laura fashion responded.
But the question I asked you is, do you agree with the UK's terror chief who said that anti-Semitism is the biggest national security emergency? I wasn't asking you about Benjamin Netanyahu's actions. I was asking if you agree with that view.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily helpful to compare emergencies, but I think there is an emergency, there is a problem, and we need to tackle anti-Semitism.
But it's quite a clear statement. He says it's the biggest emergency, national security emergency, since the ISIS attacks almost 10 years ago. Do you agree with that or not?
Well, there was a report out by the Joint Intelligence Chiefs recently that talked about emergencies to this country, being the climate crisis, about food security, indeed from threats to Russia and cybersecurity. So I'm not denying there is an issue with anti-Semitism, but what I am saying is I think all of these emergencies need dealing with.
Again, well answered. She then asked him about those who are not happy with the direction of the Greens.
Taking the party and thought, I don't like it one bit, I'm not happy.
I think he's completely wrong. When I ran to be leader of the Green Party, we had 50,000 members. We now have 227,000 members. We've quadrupled in the polls. And actually, I meet people all the time who have been in the party for 20, 30 years, who describe themselves as deep environmentalists, who are incredibly happy that the Green Party is being seen and being heard. Yes, on issues of social justice, on the fact that we have a toxic combination right now of high bills and low wages, and we need to deal with social justice, but also about environmental justice. We know that inequality is at the heart of the climate crisis. It's corporations that destroy our environment, destroy our democracy, and destroy our community.
She's a massive reason why I could never watch that. I can only watch clips of what happens on Laura's show because Laura's so insufferable. But finally, Zack called out Nigel Farage, who was supposed to be on Laura Kuenssberg, but guess what he did? Pulled out last minute.
Absolutely determined. Nigel Farage didn't even bother to turn up today because he's on the run. The Green Party are ready to stop reform. We took on the billionaire donors in Gorton and Denton. We're going to do it right across England and Wales. vote Green on Thursday.
What made Zack's Laura Kuenssberg appearance so effective was that after navigating all the hostility, all the shitty framing that she's positing, and her feeble attempts, just like Philip, to drag him into an endless defensive clarification of grovelling, he did what a really good politician must do, and it's understand what must always happen. He returned the conversation to politics every single time, like legendary stuff. Curtis, what are your reactions to this? What did you make of Laura's line of questioning, and did Zack do a good job?
It's very interesting in how different worlds we inhabit and different universes we seem to inhabit. It seems like 50% of Twitter was saying that Zack Polanski's interviews, whether it was with Trevor Phillips, whether it was with Laura Kuenssberg, it was car crash. He couldn't answer a question, or he looked really angry, as the interviewers destroyed him. You look at the other side of Twitter, and the other 50% say, Zack Polanski did a great job. He absolutely destroyed the interviewers. So I think one thing to say is there's no objective reality anymore. And I think that happens because we live in a very atomized society. I think social media doesn't help with that. In fact, social media purports that, because social media kind of funnels you the kind of content you want to see. So we're all in each other's bubbles. So if I'm going to speak from a objective sense, it's very difficult to gauge. It literally depends on who you ask. If you agree with Zack Polanski, you're going to look at him like he did a great job. If you despise Zack Polanski, you're going to think he did a terrible job. Now, I'm a lefty. So are you going to be surprised about what I'm going to say next? No, but hopefully I can give you the reasons as to why. So I think that my reasons are objective, not just subjective. Yes, I thought Zack Polanski did extremely well. So let's take on the question surrounding anti-Semitism. I think that was my favorite answer from Zack, because, and this is something in which media propaganda or media bias can go over people's heads. So the premise here is that Laura Kuenssberg is saying, well, there is now a national emergency in terms of anti-Semitism. Okay. And immediately what Zack Polanski does, and I think is absolutely fantastic, is to say, well, hold on a second. I mean, we essentially have a national emergency for many things. Why are we specifically talking about anti-Semitism? And that is where the media can sort of, I think, pollute minds to basically push the idea that there is a hierarchy of racism, that it's specifically anti-Semitism, that one is the most important, and two is the one that's currently under the most crisis, for better words, right? Neither of these things are true. Of course, the first point, there should be no hierarchy of racism. Like, if you're anti-racist, you're an anti-racist to everything. You don't get to just be concerned about anti-Semitism and then be a massive Islamophobe. Yeah, that's the political establishment, by the way. So many like right-wing commentators who will say the most disgusting things about any forms of the most disgusting racism, but are suddenly really concerned about anti-Semitism. Of course, that's just a proxy for being pro-Israel. But the second thing is anti-Semitism a unique crisis? I don't believe so. Let's take, I don't know, the actual Golders Green attack. Now, we still don't have the full facts. We don't know what's really going on. We can only take what's given to us through the media. It does look like an anti-Semitic attack. 2 Jewish people were stabbed in Golders Green. But what did the mainstream media ignore over and over again? That a man named Ismail Hussein, probably a Muslim, right, was also stabbed. Now, no one in the media said that. They kept on saying over and over again. Police reports kept saying 2 men were stabbed. No, 3 men were stabbed. So is it true that anti-Semitism is uniquely a crisis? Or is it that that racism, bigotry, and violence are all growing, yet the media is only focusing on one thing? Because the amount of attacks against Muslims are not portrayed in the media. What about the clubs, the recent queer club that was set on fire? The suspect was just let go. Do we talk about, a national emergency of homophobia? No. So the question from Laura Kuenssberg to Zack inherently is biased. Now, Zack's answer technically he didn't directly answer it because she wanted a yes or no, but he was right not to do that because the reason, and Laura's pushing for this, had Zack said, I think the police and the government are wrong, that there's a specific anti-Semitism crisis, the entire corporate media and the BBC would say, oh my God, Zack Polanski is downplaying anti-Semitism. He said no. Of course, that's not what he's saying. He said, I don't think we should be pitting communities against each other. I don't think we should be like, oh, look, there's a national emergency for Jewish people, but there's no national emergency for Muslims. So he did that, but also he didn't quite say yes or no, because again, that's being a smart political communicator. That's something Zack Polanski is very good. And by the way, don't sit here and tell me he's not. You don't get to 226,000 members and 21% in the polls if you're a bad political communicator. He knows exactly what he's doing. So of course, Laura kept pushing him on that point. In terms of, I mean, I don't want to sort of relitigate the retweet gate, but it's crazy how this entire media storm has transpired from a retweet from Zack Polanski. Zack hasn't actually conceded his point, though. He hasn't said, I was wrong to retweet this, insofar that I no longer agree with the criticisms. He still pretty much says, I think we should hold the police to account. It was the forum in which it was done, Twitter or even the mainstream media. So I'm very glad that he hasn't gone, actually, no, the police did absolutely everything right. Having said that, from a strategy point of view, and I said this last week, it's something that Zack shouldn't have just weighed in on. I mean, he didn't really weigh in on. He didn't make a statement, but even just a retweet. I think that's something you got to pick your battles, right? And then the more popular you become, maybe just don't say anything about it. Let us on commentators on the left talk about it, because we're not winning anyone's votes, right? When you're a party leader, you need to get people's votes. And let's be honest, the majority of people would have absolutely hated Zack Polanski's position on it. I'm sorry, that's just true. But again, you know, Laura Kuenssberg is an incredibly biased, well-paid journalist, and she doesn't offer anything new or refreshing. It was the same kind of questions you get from Sky News. It was the same crowd, but I think Zack Polanski objectively did a very, very good job.
It is interesting because I remember when the Golders Green attack had happened, and I was speaking to people online, obviously, and I've actually just deactivated my account as a result of this, because I've realised that there's just no point talking to people online about certain things. But I said that there was a third victim. There was a third victim who I believe probably was Muslim. He definitely wasn't Jewish. And they were like, no, there wasn't. And I'm like, wait. There was a third victim that's been completely missed out from this whole story. But it is interesting how this whole Golders Green attack is now no longer about these victims, but about how they can frame Zack Polanski as anti-Semitic himself. So it feels like they're trying to do some sort of Corbyn takedown on Polanski. It's fucking sad.
It's a complete rerun, isn't it? And in a way, I'm a little bit surprised, because I thought, you know, we've done this before, we don't need to do it again. But I think it just shows the desperation from the political establishment that they have. There's no imagination. There's no imagination in their attacks. It's, Zack Polanski prefers our enemies to us. They did that with Jeremy Corbyn. It's leading a party with a hotbed of anti-Semitism, like word for word verbatim for Jeremy Corbyn. And I would have thought the media would have had a tougher time doing it because he's Jewish himself. But they're so fucking shameless. They're like, we don't care if he's Jewish. We're going to do it anyway. Whilst the Times puts out a cartoon, which, you know, some people say it's an anti-Semitic caricature of Zack Polanski. And again, there's no self-reflection from the media whatsoever. Remember, this is the rules of the game in Britain. You cannot criticize Israel, otherwise you're anti-Semitic. But you're absolutely allowed to be anti-Semitic against Jewish people who disagree with you on Israel.